All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this work session of the South Kingstown Town Council. For everyone in the audience, this is sort of a special meeting. We haven't done this since I've been on the council, so it's great to welcome our delegation here for a discussion about state legislative topics. So this can be a good back and forth in terms of what we hope we can see happen, but also what you see up there and sort of telling us what's going on. Before we get into that, let's all pledge to the flag. And so I know on the agenda it lists a number of topics that we had sort of brainstormed about a week ago or so at our regular meeting. I don't know if you wanted to sort of give an overview, Rob, of that discussion.
So there's not much more to add than what is on the list here, but I will say that the town council is working hard on a number of items that I think the reps and senators may be interested in. We actually started off this exercise with the municipal court concept that we want to follow, and we'll get into that conversation. A copy of that legislation is in front of everybody. And another piece of legislation that we thought we would need, and I'm going to talk about that project very briefly because I think it's one of the most innovative things happening in the state of Rhode Island with regard to affordable housing, and I'd like to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on. It turns out that based on some pretty good legal research and analysis and drafting, we're not going to need authority from the state legislature. We already have the authority from the state legislature to engage in this program, but I want to describe it for you anyway. The Affordable Housing Collaborative Committee here in South Kingstown was charged about a year ago now by the town council to go out and figure out clever ways to induce the construction of affordable housing, find ways to encourage the development of units that would meet the state criteria for affordable housing. The Affordable Housing Collaborative has come back with two pieces of local legislation, two ordinances that will change the way we tax property. The council hasn't come to any conclusions, but what's being contemplated is a tax abatement for the value of property that is built on an existing lot as an ancillary or as an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. The tax treatment that is being contemplated is that if the unit is an affordable workforce unit, the Affordable Housing Collaborative's recommendation is that for 5 years there be no tax paid on that newly constructed unit, whether that unit is in the backyard or is built in a home, as an apartment within a home. If the unit is deed restricted and therefore qualifies under the state program as a lower moderate income unit, the tax liberty, if you will, the freedom from tax will be for the duration of the deed restriction, is what the Affordable Housing Collaborative has proposed. It's a very clever way of dealing with the production of affordable housing because it doesn't require big-time developers to come in and develop property in green fields. It is a way to give small property owners who already live here a tax break and help folks subsidize their income by creating rental units in their backyard or in their basement or in their attic. So it's a really interesting approach to affordable housing. It gets units produced and at the same time gives tax relief and income streams to local residents. So it's a very clever idea. We'll see exactly how the details shake out as the council continues their discussion on this. But I'd like to let the reps and senators know about it because I think we've got a winner here, and I think that South Kingstown is going to become a model for the production of affordable housing units. The Affordable Housing Collaborative's research led them to Massachusetts and California. They've taken a lot of inspiration from some programs in California. Nothing like this has succeeded in New England yet. I think we're going to be the first to really get a program off the ground, and it really shows some potential. That isn't something we're going to need help with, though, because our solicitor has found a way to do it with existing authority, which the state legislature has already given, so thank you. The other items that we want to talk about tonight, though, are things that we're going to need some help with. The first and really the biggest is the municipal court. I don't know what the number is at this point, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 of the 39 towns in the state of Rhode Island already have a municipal court. We see this as an important way to improve constituent service. We see this as an important way to improve the adjudication and administration of justice. It's a heck of a lot easier for folks to come to this room at a municipal court session than it is to deal with the district court programs, which can be crowded and difficult to deal with. They're expensive in some ways. We really think that this is not just a way to improve the enforcement of local ordinances, but we think it's a way to improve the quality of service provided to people who find themselves in conflicts with neighbors for property maintenance reasons or what have you. So we're trying to make it easier. We're trying to make the cost of complying with local ordinances lower, and we think a municipal court is going to be the best way to go. I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about that one, or?
Thank you, and thank you, members of the council. So, Rob, do you have any numbers on this? Like, there's going to be an initial cost, I believe. We talked about this years ago when I was on the council, and there was initial cost. But what are we losing by not having a municipal court? Because I think we don't prosecute a lot of things. And because of how expensive it is to go to district court and, time consuming and all of that. So I think it would help when we try to pass this if we had numbers together. And the other thing that I've already spoken to you about is we don't want to be in competition with the traffic tribunal because that will hurt us. So we have to be very clear as to what kind of tickets or violations or citations that we're going to pursue and what we're not, because it's already the jurisdiction of the traffic tribunal. So we have to be fully aware of that.
So you've got a copy of the legislation. It's the same bill that was actually introduced last year, so there's been no changes. If you were hearing objections from folks from the traffic tribunal or anyone making objections on their behalf, we ought to address that issue. Our town solicitor's approach to this was to replicate the authorities that have been granted to other municipalities. South Kingstown has not asked for anything that other municipalities have not received. But if other communities have received an authority that the traffic tribunal now has a problem with, we're going to need to deal with that. I'm loath to say we should have less authority than any other municipality. On the other hand, the issue here is not so much generating revenue as it is making sure that we've got a forum for resolving the sorts of disputes that we deal with all the time. We deal with property maintenance issues constantly. We deal with neighbor conflicts, trespassing issues with the college kids. These sort of nuisance things are not the kinds of cases that judges in the district court want to hear. They're a pain in the neck for these folks. And so we end up sort of, in fact, we had it's not a great example. I won't use it. We have cases constantly, though, that just don't get the sort of full hearing that they deserve because they're not. There's more pressing work to be done in the state courts. That's true. That's right.
Especially the property maintenance ones, which right now we cite them, but there's no teeth. So you don't want to clean it up. You don't clean it up, right? And you've got neighbors who are, distressed. So we need a forum.
So just...
Rob and the town council and everyone else for being here tonight. But the Senate did get that passed.
Yep.
However, it was late in the session. I wasn't aware of any objections that were raised in the committee, so I think it was a matter of timing. I can't speak for the House, we got plenty of reps here, but it was passed late in the session, but I knew how important it was to the town, so we really pushed in the Senate to get it done. So we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so just for my edification, in current municipal courts around the state, do they have jurisdiction over traffic violations, or I haven't gotten enough?
Like he said, minimum housing violations, a small trespass, but mostly all they deal with is parking tickets as far as traffic. If you try and go beyond that with any other kind of ticket, that's when they get their feathers ruffled. So we have to be careful.
So again, you know, the town solicitor is not looking, and I don't think the town council is looking for any authority that hasn't generally been given to other municipalities.
A good course. We don't want to have less, but we just want to have some equity there.
So, Rob, what would the initial cost be in implementing that, and at what point, if at all, would we start generating a net income?
So it actually depends on when we start, and it depends on exactly how we configure the enterprise. What we're contemplating is setting up an enterprise fund in the first year, knowing that we're going to be losing money for a period of time. And then as revenues begin to come in, we'll pay back the debt that's been incurred on that fund. So it will be a self-sufficient fund. Our experience, or our discussion with others who have gone through this, is that their experience has been that they begin to make money about a year into the operation. So it's a loss leader for about a year. You've got to hire a judge, you've got to hire a clerk. Really, the way we'll do it here is that the town clerk or folks in the town clerk's office will pick up additional responsibilities and will be compensated for the work that they do in the municipal court. So it's really just a matter of adding some time, some hours, and making sure that you account for them. Dale has actually done a great deal of research. If you want to share, it's I think.
I don't know if she has a microphone. Just for the record, to sort of get that on the microphones, the costs of the anticipated court would essentially be overtime in the departments that are going to be staffing it, costs for police, $15,000 cost associated with a software for processing things. Is that about it? Okay.
And the judge, of course.
The judge's stipend. Okay. So, you know, I think it's within our capacity to be able to fund that for a year.
It's not horrible. I mean, again, you know, when we're talking about a stipend, it's not uncommon to see a $15,000, $20,000 stipend. It's not uncommon to see police overtime really limited to the courtroom and the time when monies are being collected, fines are being collected. So it's not, you know, courts meet once a month, maybe twice a month. We're not talking about a huge number of hours with regard to police overtime. And then the clerks, again, that overtime. And some preparation work as well. It's not an extraordinary commitment of time or resources. It is going to be a loss leader. We are going to be out, you know, up to $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 before we start seeing those monies come back in.
May I be recognized?
Sure.
Thank you, Abel. So when I read this, I think it's safe to say there's broad powers for the court. I don't think we're less powerful than anyone, but I think we are more powerful than other courts in the state. And my concern is on page 3, number 4. dealing with the power to order dwellings into receivership, which is a state form of bankruptcy, and the power to order the removal of any cloud on title. I just know those are pretty substantial equitable powers that are held by the Superior Court, and I just want to understand the rationale for the town wanting to have those substantial powers over property. Like, what would be an example that would be justified?
I can't speak to the solicitor's rationale in drafting. What I can say is the sorts of clouds that I can imagine are the sorts of liens that would be placed on property associated with fines that have been levied by the town because of noncompliance with a housing code, for example. That's the kind of thing that I would contemplate a municipal court doing.
Understand. And the devil is always in the details because, I could put a lien on my neighbor's property because they owe me money, and I don't know if I would want a municipal court being able to vitiate that lien.
Yep.
And then with receivership, in pretty much every single mortgage covenant you see, it's a violation of your mortgage provisions if a receiver is appointed. So I'd be concerned about the town's ability to force someone into a default on their mortgage. So I just wanted to raise that. I don't know if the solicitor could have more detailed answers. He could reach out to me and just
Absolutely.
explain that.
I mean, again, what we're looking for is the authorities that have been granted to municipal courts around the state. We're not looking for more authority. If this is overly broad, then I'm sure the solicitor, is going to be more than willing to redraft.
Understand these are things that I think will just be raised to us in the House, for example, and I would just kind of like to be able to respond as to why it's needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll make sure that we get it straight. I mean, again, not looking for more than anybody else has had, and if this does that, we've got to fix it.
And so if I may, I was the sponsor of it on the House side, and we had a hearing and questions were raised about the language, and I was told that this is just copied from other municipal courts, so it's not as though this were drafted with South Kingstown specifically in mind. This is just existing language that other towns have had. So, we're not setting any precedent. By enacting this, this is what other towns have. So to Rob's point earlier, we're not looking for any more, but we do want to have equal power.
And to be perfectly honest with you, if there's some particular or peculiar concern about language and it has to do with receivership or if it's not at the core of what we need to be able to do, which is enforce local ordinances, we're willing to talk to whoever has that concern and willing to make whatever concessions need to be made. Again, I'm loath to give up authorities that others have got. However, if it's the only way to get the authority to do what we need to do, we can talk.
Any other comments on the municipal court? We'll move.
Do we have sort of a strategy for this? Do we have sort of a way to make sure that we can not be late and not? I mean, I know that the delay last time was our fault. We were late in the season in getting to you. I don't mean to suggest anything otherwise, but we want to be as helpful. This one's important. We want to make sure that we can get this one moved as quickly as possible. If we were able to get something done early in the session, it would be very helpful because we can begin to plan for budgeting, getting the office up and running.
It can be pre-filed. So now that we have the language and, this is what you're going to be using and you've reviewed it and it's acceptable at the council's desire to resubmit, then it can be pre-filed now. And, among the first hearings that we have, it could be on an agenda within weeks.
So I guess my only thought on this is just tonight, and Carol, you're an attorney, maybe it makes sense for you to talk to Mike and just find out what Mike Ursillo, the town solicitor's got to say. And if Mike is good with changes, can you just get it in?
You know Mike Ursillo, right?
Yeah, I just know the language is broad, and I don't want to hit a speed bump
Yeah.
where people say you're giving powers that maybe we shouldn't. And I want to look at the other statutes, too, so I can respond. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to be able to respond.
I think it would be helpful to have the attorneys look at this,
Right.
talk to Mike, decide, what you think. I'll talk to Mike as well, but I'd like to see it just be okay. I don't want us to get in and then have, complaints or concerns expressed 3 weeks or 3 months into the session and find out, damn, if we
Yeah, no, we should get it in right away.
And if
Teresa's
you
right.
can affirm the exact number of towns that have this, how many use this precise language, I mean, those are, I don't know if you can reach out to the League of Cities and Towns, or, who it would be, but to be able to go in and when a question arose, say, no, actually, 13 towns who've passed it since 1987 have used this precise language.
Good.
These are not overly broad, but for, to allow us to understand, where this language came from and how many other cities and towns have it.
we can do that.
I don't think the language was the objection last year,
It was the tribunal and it was the
tribunal, that was.
as well as the language. There were questions that came specifically about it being overly broad.
Okay. Well, let's get with Mike. Let's just make sure
Right.
that we've got something.
I mean, Narragansett's had it several years, so.
Right.
We want to do pretty much what they're doing, I think, the same kind of issues that arise there, arise here. so.
We did try to do something with Narragansett together, but it was going to be cost prohibitive, I think, last time. The only other question I have is, how does the process work when everyone at the State House, when you submit a bill, is it like 1 or 2 people, or is it everyone that represents the district? Okay. Great.
And in the Senate, it doesn't make any difference. It could be one or all. I mean, right, always have some representatives on the bill. And I just hope we continue to stay in the loop with the reps, because if the bill's, like I said, passed the Senate, if it's going to be substantially changed, we want to know that early. So, so we can have the same bill go in both chambers.
All right. I can talk to Mike tomorrow and sort of get him to touch base with you guys, and we'll make sure that we have something ready to go as soon as the session is. I mean, if there are changes, I can't imagine they're all that great. I think they're going to be slight.
The next item on the list is the state school funding formula. And I know that there's a study commission at the moment ongoing, looking at the funding formula. I have not heard much about what they've been saying. So if you all have an update, that would be excellent.
Well, what night was it last week we went, Rob? I don't know.
Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday? And you presented this PowerPoint. I mean, we mostly are asking for the unfunded mandate for the transportation, which is over $4 million, I guess, for the next fiscal year. And that's about all we're going to get, is that amount from the state in the next fiscal year. So we basically have an unfunded mandate, and I think Rob's got it down to, what was it, $76 a child?
$75.79.
So, I think it was important that we went up there and we made the pitch. They're aware of it. We talked to a lot of the lobbyists up there, the superintendent's lobbyists. We talked to RIDE. I think they all understand. I don't think anybody's really hopeful that it's going to change this year. So I didn't get a positive feedback from anybody and I did talk to Representative Greg Amore, and he thinks it's not a good year to hope for more money out of the education funding formula. And he's, I don't know, what is his position, Teresa? You might know better.
He's the chair of the Subcommittee on Education and Finance, so it's his purview to oversee the departments that are contained in education, higher as well as primary and secondary. So this it's a task force that's looking at the school funding formula, similar to the last time we went through this process, and Senator Sosnowski was there at that time, and it enacted the very first year that I served, but it was a 4-year process reviewing it last time. So the work that's being done right now is not in anticipation of having a change and a new formula created in time for a January enactment or anything along those lines. Right now, I would say what's happening is it's a baseline, and they're understanding what data RIDE has. They're trying to find out the differences between the high-performing and the low-performing schools. They're trying to draw conclusions from, what makes certain districts successful. We've been collecting data from UCOA, the Uniform Chart of Accounts, for over a decade now, and we asked RIDE, that's what the beginning of this, it was a two-part presentation at this last funding formula meeting, and we went with the expectation that RIDE would be able to give us answers to questions that were provided to them in advance as to what these uniform chart of accounts are showing. It was deeply disappointing to hear RIDE say the same exact thing that they were saying 10 years ago. We are comparing apples to oranges because people don't input the data the same way in each district. And I honestly thought that they would be spending the last 9 years fixing that and digging deep into that data. And it was incredibly disappointing to find out that they just threw their hands up apparently 9 years ago and said, we can't get them to put the data in the way that it's useful, so we just give up on it. And it makes me wonder why we even do it. Is it just to make ourselves feel good that we can fill in little, boxes? But hopefully through this process, we're going to gain some insight. We're going to begin to see, where changes have been positive over the last 10 years and where the increase in investment has failed us. That was the expectation. So that was the first part of the last task force, and the second part was about improvement, like what schools are doing once they're put kind of on notice. So what their school improvement plans are. That is an ongoing process. They seem to have considerably more data on that. This will be year one.
The thing that I'd like folks to sort of focus on with regard to the funding formula is there's this sort of waving of hands about performance and the education policy and all of this. This funding formula is not about education. This funding formula is a tax policy. This funding formula is about taking money from some people in the state and giving it to other people in the state. That's what the funding formula is. There's nothing in the funding formula that tells teachers how to teach better. There's nothing in the funding formula that tells educators how to teach at all. It only tells administrators how much money they have to raise because the state's not sending money for the purpose of providing education to the kids in that town.
And this current version of it was really intended to equalize. So there was, essentially, for those who aren't aware, the state had stopped doing they really hadn't adjusted the way that they were allocating funds for the longest time. So certain districts grew in size, certain districts lost students in size, and yet the allocation of the funding was consistent. So this last one, 10 years ago under GIST, was meant to really bring those who were had high numbers of students but were still getting the same amount of money up, and those like us, the suburbs, who had really lost students down. So
in the 9 years, though, that the funding formula has been in place, we have lost half of our state funding. This year, we will receive $4,617,000 from the state. Our transportation costs alone in this district are $4,400,000. That's $217,000 if you net out the transportation. Now, I know that the formula says specifically that it's got to go into classroom, but the mandate for the transportation is still a state mandate. And if you take the 4.4 out of the 4,617, that's $217,000 to educate 2,883 kids. It's $75.79 that the state is sending net of transportation.
The only other thing I would add to that is, we have a town that's large in landmass, and there's other communities that don't have a big busing budget to deal with. So it's definitely concerning. And then going back to, I guess, what when this all started, I guess, 10 years ago with the old commissioner, I think back then there were some other concerns that they may have had regarding the way that we were dealing with our school system at the time in terms of buildings that we were utilizing. And here we are again 10 years later dealing with that again. And what I don't want to see is for our community to continue to be punished for reasons that are, I guess, in our control, but out of our control at the same time.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't want you to think that we don't know all of what you just said to us. I was on the town council when Deborah just was in this room and laying this out. And I came up to her right after and said, where are you going to be in 10 years? And I said, I know you're not going to be here in Rhode Island, and she isn't. So we're well aware of what the numbers are. We've been fighting it up there, but we're also dealing with, say, Representative Amore from East Providence, who, when I talk to him, always says, well, all those years you were getting all that extra money. So, and so now you're feeling what the urban areas are feeling. So there's no sympathy coming to South Kingstown. So that being said, it's not just him. No other money is going to be coming to South Kingstown. So South Kingstown does have to tighten its belt. That's the way it is. We've been fighting for it because we're talking about that transportation piece of legislation. In the 5 years that I've been up there, I've been putting the bill in for transportation and pounding the table about transportation because that's the only place that we're going to get money. So I know we've been at the forefront of it. So when you're telling us all of those numbers, don't think that we're not here as the state reps or the state senators and did not know that any of this was going to occur. So even at our level down here, things have to change and people have to hold the line and you're going to have to hold the line more because there's not much more that we can do up there. With our new commissioner, Infante Green, she is going to still be pushing for the urbans. She wants to, take what benefits some other communities and bring it into Providence. That money's still going to follow Providence. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. I believe that by what happened with our money in the past 9 years, it certainly hurt South Kingstown, and I don't see any of the benefits happening out of the urban core. That being said, suburbia is not being heard, and it's not going to change. I hate to say it that way, but I want to be realistic here. I'm not making any political promises or anything. I'm a realistic person. So it's got to be held the line down here. So I just want you to know that we know all of this. We've been living this. I lived it on the town council. I'm living to see the aftermath of it now, and I don't see any benefits coming our way in the near future, except for probably some of the transportation costs, because I talk about the 400 miles of road that we're covering every single day in South Kingstown with the buses. I haven't lost what I learned when I was on the town council. I just want to make that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to say that I was on the original Funding Formula Commission and was not happy with the legislation that came out. I had several conversations with the council at the time in South Kingstown, the town manager at the time, and also with Deborah Gist. I adamantly opposed the legislation on the Senate floor, and the answer was given to me that the town of South Kingstown, over the years, had been given too much money, and they were not going to get any more money like they used to. In years past, we advocated for the town. The former representatives that served, along with me, we worked really hard to get money for this town. We were successful. But things changed with Deborah Gist. And it was also the will of the majority of the General Assembly to pass that funding formula, because as we know, the legislature is the way it is. We have more individuals from the urban core, they have the votes, and they pass the budget. And I'm not saying, I don't want that to sound like I'm not in favor of the urban communities getting more. They have a lot more problems than we have here. But the idea of the funding formula when it passed 10 years ago, when I worked on the commission, it was to have a base funding formula across the state that was fair for every child. And it didn't turn out that way. So now here we are. And by the way, I want to thank you for coming up before a Senate commission. It's nice to see representatives come before a Senate commission. That didn't used to happen in the old days. So it's nice to see reps come forward to Senate commission, because at the end of the day, the House and the Senate work together on these issues. So it was really good to see that. But getting back to where we are now, I would agree with almost everything that Representative Fogarty said. But to add about the situation of Providence, to be realistic, we're going to be faced with Providence asking for more money. That's what's going to be before the General Assembly. And we're going to be fighting for that. We're going to be fighting for what South Kingstown gets. And Misery Loves Company, the regional districts, Cheraho, Warren, Bristol, all the rural ring has been suffering since this. So my colleagues, I mean, I know you're new here, Rob, and you are dedicated, and so is this council. But I want you to know that these folks sitting at the table are working hard for South Kingstown, and we'll continue to do that. And this is the way it is.
Senator, I am absolutely, positively assured of that point. I don't mean my frustration to sound like it's directed at you.
Well, we share your frustration. We're just giving it back.
I will, however, share with you that we'd like to continue to make the case, and anything we can do to support carrying the case, even in the face of overwhelming opposition, even if it is a hopeless case. It's a case that needs to be made because $75.79 per student is just not acceptable. It's just not fair. It's just not right. And I'll point to the income distribution chart. Yes, it's true that urban districts have got more problems than suburban districts generally, but this is what our families look like in South Kingstown. We have a large number of folks who can't pick up additional costs. And when the state doesn't provide the assistance, we have to take it out of their property taxes.
So I just want to piggyback a little bit on what's been said. We met with the school committee last night, which is nice for first sort of budget session. I think one of the statistics that stuck out to me was, before the funding formula, or the first year of the funding formula, 30% of the school budget was state funding. It looks like this coming year it'll be under 9%. And I doubt that any other community has seen that type of decline in terms of the percentage of their budgets that are coming from state aid. Obviously, the fact that transportation isn't taken into account in the funding formula has been a major disservice to our community, and no fault of our own that we have a big landmass here. So hopefully we can all be a resource for you as you're continuing to advocate for a fairer funding formula. So I think what we would ask is just tell us how we can be helpful. Keep us in the loop. As I know we're just at the beginning of this process because we're just getting to the end of the last funding formula. So we're going to have some time here. Faces that over here might change, but it's definitely going to take continued communication between us.
So I just have one question. We're in year 10 of a 10-year funding formula, right? So what are you hearing about year 11? Teresa said it's going to be 4 years of plan. Last time it was 4 years of planning for the funding formula. What's going to happen in year 11?
If I may, as I said, I don't anticipate anything coming up for the next 3 years. It'll be status quo. It'll be the final year implemented until we get this through, which is what got us into the quandary that we're in now. It was just that they stuck to that last formula because it's politically a nightmare to deal with. Mm-hmm. And again, things will get out of whack and we'll have to have an overcorrection. The best case scenario would be 3 years, 4 years at that level funding. A couple points that I'd like to make is any of that data that you can get, Abel, we don't have staff, so this is it. Like what you see here, we don't have a school committee, we don't have finance directors, we don't have the League of Cities and Towns. So any data like that you can provide to us is immensely beneficial. And so, arm us with that data and we will take it up there and we will make the most of it. We need to, start getting creative. Our transportation is our largest cost, but, focus on it with laser. Maybe what we do is we look at a campus. I know that there's talk about moving the high school. Maybe we have the same start times and we look at, just trying to find a way to get more kids on a bus at the same time so that we're not having to do 3 runs for the buses. The other thing is, and again, I'm not saying that's an answer or a solution, but I'm saying that we really can't, we have to look outside of where we normally go. And the arguments that we got, as Rep. Fogarty and Senator Sosnowski had said, that we were overfunded for all of those years, because we were. We just simply were. We had declining enrollment, and we were still getting the same amount that we were getting. So Undeniably, it was time to raise the urbans up. They needed it desperately. But the other argument that I get is that we, in our 9 years, maxed out on our tax cap only once. So they look at us. They're not idiots. They have staff. They look at us and they say, you clearly have more capacity within your citizens because you've only once hit that max tax cap. That's hard to say 3 times. But, I'm bringing you the reality of that. That's what we're up against.
One of the things that really stands out to me on this chart right here is the fact that if you look at it, most households, based off of the census data, the last census data that we have, make somewhere between $15,000 and $75,000. So it's something they don't want to hear, I guess, at the State House, and like we talk about the fact that they have a little bit more pull in up at the State House, and even if I remember correctly, there was the state the task force that you guys were visiting. They weren't easy to deal with, from what I remember. Like meaning not giving you guys the proper meeting times and things like that, if I remember correctly, at the time.
There's been confusion about scheduling,
Yeah.
but I don't think anybody was.
No, it wasn't intentional, but I'm just saying.
We don't usually get a lot of notice on scheduling up at the State House. Usually, 48 hours? I mean, that isn't our doing, but...
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I wish they would work.
I would say that we've never had anybody from the school department come up there while I've been there. I mean, did she?
Yeah, she used to, I think, maybe.
I mean, the few times I've tried to get somebody to come up for one of these bills, I haven't had any luck. So I think it's important. If it's important to the town, we have to get either the superintendent or somebody from the school committee, or yourself, Rob, like you came up the other night. I think these bills where we're trying to get money, I mean, they're going to listen to the superintendent. They're going to listen to you. I mean, you guys have your finger on the pulse, and that's what we need. I think we need that desperately on some of these bills.
So we recognize that you guys are fighting an uphill battle in this one. And again, we fully appreciate everything you do to advance the transportation bill every year. What we're suggesting is we need to just keep fighting, and anything we can do down here to help, we're willing to do. Anything we can do, because we know that this is a tough fight. If there's, a hearing, or if there's a paper, if there's data you need, just pick up the phone, let us know, and we will crunch the data. We will find somebody to go up to the meeting. If we need to cajole to get somebody who you need as a special particular witness, we'll cajole. Whatever it takes to take this fight, because I think it is going to take 3 years before we get a funding formula. The current number, this 4.67, is not good. It's going to hurt this community badly, and we need to be moving away from that number to a different number. Now, your points about figuring out how to reconfigure things locally are understood here, and we heard that from the superintendent last night. She recognizes that we need to figure out how to make sure that we're doing our business, the school's business, the municipality's business, as best we can given the resources we've got. But the resources we've got are constraining the community's ability to do the business we do and to grow in an effective way. Our school budget has been flat. It's been fairly level over the last 9 years. But that's because the municipality has made up $4 million worth of lost revenue. That's $4 million that has cost taxpayers here a substantial amount that isn't easy to continue going forward. This is a dire circumstance. This is not, gee, it'd be nice if the state had treated us fairly. This one's really, really injurious.
And I think what he's, sorry.
I was just wondering if there's any type of coalition with the League of Cities and Towns or the school committees or whatever. I think that's really important, a coalition of, again, the rural ring, the suburban schools, that, because you're not alone. I mean, South Kingstown is getting hurt probably the most, if not, as many other communities, but we hear from all these communities, but there doesn't seem to be a coalition of the towns working on this. And I know everyone is busy. Everyone's so busy working in their towns and the town government doing a good job and the school committees and running the schools. It takes a lot of time to do all that stuff. But by the same token, the louder voices are heard up there, and we hear a lot more from the urban communities on the education issue. So just wondering if there is a coalition, and I know you're a member of the League of Cities and Towns, and they've been very effective on legislation stopping and getting some legislation passed. So a coalition, I think, would be a good idea.
You're exactly right. We've got to look for allies where we can find them. We need to reach out to similarly situated communities. The challenge, of course, is that this is a very small state. You're dealing with a total population of possible allies of 39. Peel off all of the urbans because they're the opposite side of the dispute here. And then you start getting into numbers in the 9, 10 range. And the way the formula is designed, you start peeling folks off real quick because we're not all similarly situated. Very few communities have the exact same demographic composition as South Kingstown. Very few, in fact, probably none, have suffered the same decline that South Kingstown has declined, and none will be locked into the same low level compared to previous funding. So nobody looks at the problem exactly as we do. Nobody's got the same transportation challenge. There are others with similar transportation challenges, and the transportation debate, as I know you guys are fully aware, is also one that can be twisted. I mean, we may see this formula change to include transportation for state students. You know, we talk transportation and it ends up being, state home student transportation or regional transportation or not transportation that benefits South Kingstown. We have to be careful that the allegiances that we are forming don't work against us in the end on this one, too.
Well, then you understand what we're up against.
We absolutely do. I mean,
we're there advocating for our municipalities, and then we have to work with others to make sure that we get legislation passed for our municipalities that is agreeable to the others. So what you're saying is what we're up against as well.
Absolutely.
So I think there really needs to be, we're going to continue to fight as hard as we can at the State House, but I agree with what you said, Rob, about working diligently within the town. Right. And the new initiatives that you mentioned about the affordable housing. So, that sounds great, but I'm sure that's going to have a dollar figure on it. All these things are going to, these are great things for the municipality, but we have to think of the education, too. So, we're in this all together.
Right.
And we'll all do what we can do.
So if there's no coalition, maybe we should start reaching out to other similar communities, even if they're slightly different than ours, and try to put one together, if we can. The only other thing I would add is you mentioned we've been making up the budget on the other side in terms of on the municipal side over the years. The problem with continuing to do that is that we end up not having enough EMS services, which we're working on right now, or not addressing our roads that we have in our town that need to be addressed, or other improvements that we want to make to our infrastructure.
That's right, and the other challenge is it also constrains the way the community can develop. I've talked about the need to improve public safety, and the council last year invested funding for an expanded paramedical service, a much-needed improvement in our public safety apparatus. But we have needs in the police department. We have a very successful volunteer fire company here in South Kingstown, but the history of fire service everywhere is volunteers are hard to recruit, they're hard to maintain. Neighborhoods and towns that have relied on volunteers all over the country over the last 20 years have seen their volunteer systems beginning to wane, beginning to falter, and you see municipalities moving from volunteers to combined paid volunteer companies and eventually moving to paid companies. If we're committing all of our resources to education because we're not getting anything other than $75.79 net of transportation, we're not going to be able to do that. This is really, in many ways, a threat to the ability of the community to grow and evolve in a healthy and productive way.
Just to add on to that thought, I mean, that's one municipal need. I think, although we haven't been maxing out the 4% cap regularly here, or, just once last year, it's foreseeable that we're going to be hitting that a lot more frequently, especially if we have a lot of bonding to do in the next few years, which is extremely likely. So if we pass, say, an $80 million school facilities bond, or do that in 2 tranches, that will push us up against that 4% cap every year.
What are we spending per pupil now? Did you get those numbers last night?
It's between 19 and 21 and a half.
Are we still at the high end for most municipalities?
Yes.
We are.
We're high. But again, the reason that that's happened is a decline in the student population. It's reduced class sizes over time.
Any other comments on the school funding formula issue? Right. I do want to keep us moving.
If I may,
And, I have been begging for it to be reopened. And we have to be careful for what we wish for, because there is no sympathy for us at the state level. The ELL population continues to grow in other parts of the state. When they open this up, there is a significant chance that we stand to lose even more. So don't think that in 4 years there's going to be a silver lining where, we're going to be getting a new influx of money. There is, it's greater than, it's about, there's a high likelihood that we will actually be getting less. So just
Do we stand a chance of getting representation from one of you on these committees? So our voice is louder, perhaps, than it is from the gallery?
I'm on the finance committee. I've worked
Right.
on this. I'm so steeped in this. I
get it.
I've almost got laryngitis on this issue.
Right. I just want our voice to be louder, Sue. That's what I'm looking for. And
We're pretty loud.
they're well
We
aware.
are very loud.
Pretty loud, this group.
We've been pretty loud.
right.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
We're outnumbered.
Between us,
Yeah.
we put in funding for, we got increased money for the school housing aid. It's for students who are housed here, even though their home district is not South Kingstown. So it took us, every year that I've gone in, it took me 8 years to get that adjusted, but it had been something like 18 years for that to even be looked at again. So every opportunity that we've had to bring money into our district via the school budget, we've been advocating. We have the transportation. I've put in, we accelerated the school funding formula for the urbans so that they could get their money faster. So every year, we supported it, right, because we want to do what's best for the state. So we increased the allocation to those who were gaining more money, and I asked for a freeze. So I wanted us to have a 3-year freeze before we got those last 3 years implemented, and have been putting that in every year. So we're not just sitting there, we're dreaming up things that we know are never going to pass, just so that people can understand the pain that we're going through.
No one understands better than I do here, like what you go through, right? So I lived with,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I understand that. I think what I'm asking is, when I looked at the makeup of the committee, I didn't see South County, not just South Kingstown,
No,
the Senate committee.
that's
When I looked at the special,
That's a task
right,
force.
well, the task force, okay, so let me rephrase that. When I looked at the task force, I did not see South County represented on that task force, not just South Kingstown, right? So I'm bothered by that, because I think South County should have a voice on that task force.
It's a research task force. Just as I said, things are done differently now in the General Assembly, just as I said. To have House members come to a commission was different than I've seen before. It's not only South County, as I said before, The rural areas are very interested in this. But this was a specific commission. I asked to be on that. Individuals who are steeped in education wanted to be on that. Doesn't mean that I wasn't involved, and I'm not still involved. I watched it. I watched who was there the other night. I've watched every one of those commission hearings. And I'm on the Finance Committee. I have a vote on the Finance Committee. I'm going to continue to advocate. The bottom line is, let me reiterate that, as Teresa has said and Kathy has said, we are going to be facing a request from Providence for more money. I look at that as an opportunity that we'll be able to stand up and advocate more for what we need down here. It doesn't mean we're going to get it, but this is going to be an issue that's going to be before us, and I don't know how well it's going to be accepted by the other members of the General Assembly. But getting back to Providence, for all the last 9 years, all the money that has gone to the urban districts, as Teresa was talking about, look what's happened. Look at Providence. Where's the money? What happened to it? Where's the accountability? So we're moving forward. We will have the opportunity to discuss this issue and how the funding formula is working and so forth. But just because you don't see my face on a commission doesn't mean I'm not interested. And it doesn't mean that I'm not an advocate for it or anybody else at this table.
You know I'm not questioning anyone's commitment. I'm just questioning, perhaps, the leadership's inclusion of South County. That's what I'm questioning.
It has nothing to do with this issue
with
at
the
all.
task
It
force,
has nothing to do
not
with this.
including South County.
No.
Okay.
There wasn't
then
even
fair
someone
enough.
from South County on finance until I was placed on finance. So they look at things in a way that doesn't necessarily, see the state as a whole. And it's a one-sided task force. So when the final work is being done to create this, it will be the House and the Senate together. This is really the first glancing blow. I mean, the way I see it, it's a shot across the bow to RIDE saying, you better get your act together because we're not getting the data that we need. We need to make we need to change the way things are being done, and we're relying on you, and right now you're not doing what's needed to be done. So what's happening before January this year is really like a warm-up to get RIDE to understand that, you just got yourself a new, person at the helm, but we need you to continue the work and to continue to give us what we need in order to make these important decisions.
Absolutely, Teresa. And just to add to that, because I don't think there's been anyone from South Kingston on the Senate Finance Committee except for myself for decades. But anyway, having said that, as far as what I saw, what the findings of this commission was clear to me that now the senators and representatives that were observing the hearings could see that RIDE was not coming forth with the information that was requested. So if the urban senators and representatives are not pleased, this is a good thing. That's going to help us as far as our argument for getting more money for the funding formula. So you have to look at things realistically. You have more senators and reps from the urban core. You got to work with them. And in this case, it's exposing what hasn't happened with RIDE. So now we can move forward. And as Teresa said, this is all information that we need prior to going forward for the budget hearings and so forth. So,
Mr. President, if I may, I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that I've meant to say we don't think you're doing enough. That's absolutely not the case. Please hear what I've said tonight as I feel like I'm not doing enough, and if there's anything I can do to help in this battle, in this fight, in this I see as absolutely urgent issue, let me know, because I'm more than willing to do anything I can, and we, the town, do whatever we can to help you as you fight that upward battle.
And can I say that I would, and take this as you feel, you work with your superintendent and your other superintendents and town managers down here in South County, and you make appointments, and you go up and see the commissioner, because they need to feel, she needs to hear your pain. We can talk to the other reps up there, but the commissioner seems so laser focused on Providence and the urban areas. I don't ever hear her talking about the suburban areas. So if you want to do work and help us, That's what you have to do. You have to get together with this coalition that Susan was talking about, and you need to be up there twice a month, maybe 3 times a month, and keep making appointments and saying, don't forget what's happening here, and make suggestions on what she can do with the urban areas, too. That's helped. Having people who live in the community, who teach, that's what's not happening in Providence and some of the urban areas. These kids aren't seeing people like them teaching. And whether they have to start talking about putting, living in the area that they teach, I think that would help the urbans, and that might, if things start going up, we'll all benefit from that. But that's what I see the town managers and the superintendents of schools doing, is being very vocal that they need to be looked at, not pushed aside by her. Because after Deborah Gist, I wouldn't hold back on any of these commissioners. They need to hear from suburban areas.
So it's a good suggestion. It's one that I will follow up on. I will make those appointments because I think it's important. I've got a very good working relationship with the new superintendent. I will say that the education community is in a tough spot with regard to the formula because nobody who's being hurt wants to be hurt more. So they recognize that the dynamic there going up and whining isn't necessarily in their interest. And again, from my perspective, the issue is not really an education policy. It's a tax policy.
Well, years ago, when Kathy was on the council, I don't think it was still in action when you were on the council, Carol, but there used to be a Washington County Council of Councils. And that's going way back. It did morph into some other things as years went on. But even my dad used to be on the council in Richmond years ago, and it was a very active membership of council members, and they would get active and go up to the State House, and they would get things done, whether it was a water issue. They ended up getting, there was pollution up in Richmond, and they ended up working as a coalition and got federal money to clean up the water and everything. So a group of councils and working with school, however you want to do it. I mean, it's been done before and it's been effective. And there were differences then that some towns were getting more than others. But overall, they worked together and they talked with each other. Just like we're talking now, we're having this communication. We haven't had meetings like this
Long time.
Long time. So communication is key. But a coalition they do it up in the city.
Well, Sue, what you're talking about is strength in numbers. If getting together, you might not agree with everything that you're going to be pushing, but you're going to be pushing everything together to get it passed. The one thing that I keep going back, it scares me when I think about the fact that the Providence school system is in such a mess that they're going to take money. They have to find money somewhere. And then on the radio today, I was listening to how there's a $200 million potential deficit or something like that they're working out. On the state side. So, I mean, where are they going to find the money? It just, yeah. And it's a problem everywhere, and...
Don't forget that Pawtucket project that's going to come through looking for more money, too.
400 million or something like that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Strength in numbers.
Right.
All right.
So, yeah.
Message heard loud and clear, and we'll follow up.
Perhaps, just one thing that occurs to me, maybe 10 years ago, the problem wasn't that we were getting too much state money and that other people were getting too little and that we had to divide the pie differently. It was really that the pie had to be bigger at that point. The pie needs to be bigger now to take care of all the kids in this state. Because we do not want to take resources from other kids either, but we just want our kids to have a fair shot.
But, Abel, I think the problem is that there's only so much you can tax folks. Because we talk about the pie being bigger. The only way to make it bigger is to increase revenue through different ways, either taxation
They've
or...
been cutting taxes for years, so I think it's crocodile tears in some regards.
If I may, we're talking about coalitions, we're talking about taking money and spending it on the urbans. A whole parallel discussion to this school funding formula is the car tax.
Right.
So once the Speaker's plan for eliminating the car tax is fully implemented, that will cost the state of Rhode Island $225 million each and every year. So one way to make that pie bigger is to reconsider eliminating the car tax. because towns like South Kingstown have, very dutifully kept the car tax rate incredibly low over the years, and we haven't seen the benefit of that. So all of those other towns and cities are, who have the same school funding formula growth, are also experiencing tax cuts, a la carte tax. So I am opposed to the elimination of the car tax, vehemently opposed, because someone who would own 5 luxury cars in a household of 2 would pay absolutely nothing. The same as a household of 5 with 2 old cars would get the same benefit of paying nothing. And to me, that is unjust. So there are other ways that we could craft tax policy that would benefit and be able to create a larger pie. And right now, if you're talking coalition building, add car tax to the agenda, because South Kingstown is losing in that battle as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we're losing it also is the fact that Providence has such a high tax rate, right? So, yeah. Right. Right. So we end up on the short end of the stick.
Yes, again. Politically, nobody wants to say, yes, I want to keep that tax in place for you. And here in South Kingstown, we should be furious about it, because it's not that much of a tax break that we're getting. Right. And it's going to go right to Providence, right to Warwick, right to Cranston, right to Pawtucket, and we lose again. So people should be vocal about that. Teresa certainly has been. I don't, again, for doing the right thing all these years, South Kingstown ends up with the short stick, and it's just not right.
All right. We could really talk about that for the rest
Yes,
of the meeting.
forever.
But let's,
Fortunately, we may have to.
All right, you'd have a lot of agreement from local towns on that issue.
Yes, that's true.
Another
And,
thing.
yeah,
That's true.
Washington County.
That's true.
so we also have on here a pilot program for educational institutions. I think that's particularly looking at URI in our town. We don't have a pilot agreement. I don't think any state schools have pilot agreements with their host communities. I think this is...
Yeah, the issue here is simple, and we're not trying to make a big issue of this. We're not going to make a big deal. We're not looking for legislation. We simply want to point out at this point that URI is expanding. The impacts on the community because of increased traffic, because of increased student residences in town are significant, and state law does not make pilot payments available to host communities when they're hosting state higher education institutions. Private higher education institutions are subject to pilot payments. The state has exempted the state institutions. The impacts on the communities are the same. It is another place where South Kingstown is not being treated equitably. And we'll point that out. We value our relationship with the university. It is clearly the largest employer in South Kingstown. We appreciate everything the university does for the town. We love having the university professors and staff involved in our civic institutions here. Nonetheless, there is this disparity between public and private institutions and the communities that host them, and it should be noted, and we need to be working toward a different environment at some point in the future.
So, have you taken this up with the university at all?
We're meeting...
The 30th, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not looking to make any waves. It's just something that we want to keep on our radar.
I would imagine that's not going to go over well. Kathy, what do you think? I would say that they're going to tell you that the state starves them, probably more than they starve us. So if you want to see President Julie get upset, I'm just warning you. I think because, he's in a battle himself up there every year, looking for more money for URI. I think we give them, 8% of the money that supports the university comes from the state. I mean, they are literally starved.
Yeah.
So I don't...
And again, we're not trying to make a big deal out of this, but
And how much are you looking
The state-
for?
The state, at some point, has to recognize that if you're taking all of the education funding away, and we have to pay for education, that means we don't have the money to pay for the police, who are the ones stopping the kids speeding because they're late to class. I mean, these things are all
Rob-
interrelated, and the state's starving us on every front.
I did take this up with the university when I first became a state rep, and Narragansett was looking for about $250,000 because of their increased costs for EMTs, fire, and police, because there's so many students there, and that fell like a lead balloon. So,
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't raise it again. And if you have a spreadsheet with the costs that the university, that the town incurs because of the university being here, have it ready, have us understand it. If we see an opportunity for any, if there's a new building being put on, like if there's some creative way that we can find to add that money, to something else that's happening at the State House and tie, if there's, URI, we just got $10 million to build 2 new hubs, transportation hubs in the state. That will be a benefit to the town of South Kingstown. So, we have benefits as well as negative aspects of having them as our partners. But if they're, we will continue to look for other ways to improve the quality of life for South Kingstown residents by having this here. I don't know, maybe we build the high school at URI and put the kids all on the new RIPTA buses that'll be coming through. Maybe we can look for more partnerships. Maybe we have a new CTE program that, the university, even if they're not able to give us dollars, maybe there are significant resources that they are willing to, to take on for the residents of South Kingstown. So again, if you can make that list, maybe it'll jar something interesting for us to propose.
And they also have a $166 million endowment.
Rob, I also would rather not move in the pilot direction with URI. Last night's meeting, we talked about how we're going to operationally implement ways to partner with URI. If we go in this direction, that's going to discourage them to want to work with us at all, with the university or President Dooley at all. So, in my opinion, I'd rather not move in that direction.
Can I just ask, because I've heard rumors about the Schneider Electric building in the University of Rhode Island, and again, if there's something going on that you can't talk about, we can leave it. I just worry about, you've talked about industrial properties, and I don't want to see that go off of the tax roll here in the town of South Kingstown, because again, that's one of our biggest pieces of industrial property that's ready to go. It's a, ready pad site. So I know that the university was talking about their interest in it when the engineering building was starting to be built, and it was very kind of them to work together and keep our engineering students, in place there. But again, just a concern of mine, because we're talking about taxes and tax rolls. I want to tread very lightly there.
Just one thought. We've been hearing talking a lot about at the town level, and also I've heard it from the school department. I think where we could use your help, and it wouldn't cost anything, would be helping us develop better relationships with the university. I think we struggle with that often. There's so many different moving pieces, different people. There's no one in charge at URI, as an example, of working with the town. There's no one at the town in charge of working with the university. It all depends on which department and what's happening that particular day. So I know we're going to have our town and gown meeting, but at the same time, anything that any of you can do to speak to someone at URI to get them more involved in our community, because they are, but I think there's so much more opportunity there at the university. And the fact that they're in our town, we should all be working together.
I think one of the things you might want to do is when you have that town gown meeting, ask them for help. Ask them, how can you help us? We have educational issues, we have money issues. I think they're very creative. And I think they'd be willing to work with us. It's always been like them and us, and we have to embrace them and not alienate them. And I think URI in many ways is alienated by Narragansett with all the fights they're having with the student housing down there and different, they have so many groups in Narragansett of landlord-tenant groups and, what do we do about the URI kids? But I always suggest embracing them as opposed to fighting with them all the time, and I think you probably would get more. So I would ask at that meeting, what can you do to help us? We're in this educational crisis. They're going to say they're in one as well, but the two together can only be a winning
And I do think there's stuff that we can do as a town to help them as well.
Yeah.
So it's not, it can be a two-way street, a win-win, hopefully, for everyone. It's just, from what I remember, is the communication hasn't always been very tight.
Well, what was said to me, recently you had a meeting, and I guess there was some complaints about students renting housing in South Kingstown, and they was some trouble or something, noise, whatever. And they said to me, I wish the town had reached out to us knowing that they had this problem. We didn't find out about it till we saw it at the meeting or in the paper, whatever it was. So we really, I think communication is key. So if you guys could communicate more often with them, and hopefully this meeting will do this,
It's almost like we should have a liaison on each side.
Absolutely. I think so.
And to add to that, thank you, Bryant, for saying that about reaching out to URI. And in the past, way in the past, I guess, there was real good communications between the town government and URI. Didn't always agree, but there was a lot more working relationship. And again, I think some of the communication has fallen off over the years. People move on, and new people come in, and at the university as well as at the town. And sometimes some institutional memory is good. I can remember there have been differences between the town of South Kingstown and URI in the past, and most of them have been worked out. And it wasn't that they weren't talked about. They were talked about ad nauseum between the town government and URI. So I think it's time for that again, and thank you for saying that and bringing that up. Again, just like this meeting tonight is like a rebirth, if you will, and I think that can happen with URI. URI, as Carol said, I 100% agree. That is one of the best, it's one of the most underutilized assets in the state of Rhode Island. University of Rhode Island can do a lot for this town, has in the past, and it can again. I just think we just need to have that coalition to work together, and I wouldn't be in favor of doing anything to diminish that relationship and what the state does for URI. Again, URI is world-renowned, and I think just reaching out and asking and working with university is the key thing to do.
And I think, imagine not having URI in our town, how different our town would be.
That's why most of us are here.
And if I recall, and I was just asking Dale, I think Steve Alford had, not really with the presidents of the university, talk with them, but like he worked with Vern Wyman, that's what she reminded me. I know that they were always in constant contact, and that's how stuff occurred between the university and the town. And I'm also thinking, too, because I've talked to different people in the biomedical field and so forth, that these places are booming and starting to really grow at the university, that they might need spaces to be like the incubator spaces. And I'm not quite sure, this might be something you want to work on, like South Road Elementary School that I pull out and see every single day. We have... Yeah, we have one of the schools in there, but they're Waldorf, thank you. They're building their new building, and they'll be gone soon, and I know the co-op nursery has moved down the street. I've seen that, too. So we're going to have an empty building there. So this is where you can work with the university and say, this might be an incubator site for something to really start developing. That might be a way of, getting a pilot program in place or some money for the town. So that's where I would work. I'm not sure who replaced Vern Wyman at the university now, but that's... We'll find out, right?
We actually deal with his boss all the time. Abby Ryder, in fact, was part of the selection committee for our planning director position recently. You're exactly right. We do need to improve the relations. I don't want to leave anyone from the delegation under the misimpression that we have a bad relationship. This council last summer held a special meeting, an emergency meeting, to make sure that we could transfer a road to the university so that they could pave the road so that we wouldn't incur the cost, so that they could get their welcome center open on time and with a roadway that, the relationship is good. but it's very transactional. We're trying to move from transactional to something deeper and more enduring.
I think that the president is very open to working with this town and making the relationship even better. I'm sure. Like you said, somebody said they're very creative. Carol said they're very creative over there, and they keep coming up with things. And we have the space that they can, pilot programs in place that can make us some more money in the town to help the town out. I think the university wouldn't be adverse.
Just look at what we walked into tonight, right? Wasn't that URI students?
It was, in fact, yeah.
Yeah. So you're already doing it to some extent. Just, we need to do more.
Formalize it. See if you can come up with a standard memorandum of understanding. See if there's some way that you can create a standing committee where you have, a portion of your town staff, someone from the council, someone from the school committee. This university benefits when they can provide opportunities for their students to be involved in things and to get real life experience. So, there really are endless opportunities. I was just at the South Kingstown Wellness Committee meeting, and I made 4 recommendations of people that, because they're losing a lot of their grant funding, university has a leadership program. I'm sure that they would be happy to include some of you in those opportunities. They have the Confucius Institute, and maybe they have the Institute for Peace and Nonviolence. They could come and lead programs for students. That an endless array of things that are happening at the university that are parallel to what we're doing in our schools, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to work together.
In that January 30th meeting, we all got the email as well. So I don't know if that's good or bad. If you guys want to, meet alone, or if you think we should show up. But of course, it's a Thursday night, so we'll be at the State House. So I don't know how realistic it is. Yeah, it's at 6 o'clock though. But we should be. Yeah. Huh?
The more the merrier, I think, from the town, that'd be fine.
So I have just a quick question for the delegation. With URI's new structure coming on, board structure coming on board in January or February, I believe, next year, is there an opportunity for the town to try to get one of those board seats or get representation? And that would help, I think, build that relationship, because we'd have input with them and we'd be represented on a regular basis.
You'll say in the Board of Education?
No, the board, URI's
new board.
Yes, that's
but
coming.
that's
Their new
yeah.
board of governors. I think there's
That new board. Well, whatever the URI Board of Education. What are they calling it? I think it's that.
I think it's the Board of Governors, isn't it? Yeah.
Board of Governors.
You can always certainly ask.
We did.
And what was the response?
And
We
it
haven't
could
gotten a
be
response.
A bargaining chip. It could be, you play a very important part of our town pilot seat on the Board of Governors. There are ways that we can, just find a way to use the leverage that we have and see what happens. And I do know that you've been working on that. That's something that we've spoken about. And
it doesn't have to be a voting member. It could just be a non-voting member with being at the meetings and being able to voice the concerns of the town or being the go-between.
We'll be making the appointments to that board.
I believe the governor makes the first one.
Right.
But the president has a lot of input on that, because this was his baby.
Yeah, that's really, in my opinion, that's really going to help the university tremendously in years to come. I think the sky's the limit as far as the ability to raise funds and do much more, not only for the university, but for the state as well. So I think it is a great opportunity to ask. And it seems to me in the past there was some type of board, an official board between South Kingston and URI. I don't know if it was official, if it was in statute or anything like that, but I seem to remember there was meetings with the town manager, council members, and
Town gown.
It just seemed like it met a lot more often.
We used to do that, yeah.
A lot more. So again, it's a rebirth.
It's going back on the 30th.
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
Right.
Then next is the potential expansion of the Union Fire District statutory
So this is another non-controversial issue. And again, this one I think is just a matter of wanting to, again, raise awareness. I don't know that we have any great expectation that this matter will be addressed, but we want you to, it could be addressed. I will just let the members of the delegation know there is a peculiar situation that has arisen. Union Fire District provides fire service for most of South Kingstown and Jerusalem, because Jerusalem's on the opposite side of the salt pond from most of Narragansett. The Union Fire District's jurisdictional lines, however, do not include Jerusalem, so they cannot levy taxes on the property in Jerusalem. They're providing the service for essentially nothing. It's a memorandum of understanding with a current value of $5,000 a year. It may be $15,000. It's a minimal amount of money each year, and it really means that South Kingstown residents are subsidizing fire protection for summer homes and homes of very affluent folks in Jerusalem. And it's, again, another injustice just because of the peculiar structures of things in South Kingstown and Rhode Island. We alert you to it. I have spoken to the fire chief about this. He's beginning to think through some solutions. It may be that they come looking for a jurisdictional boundary change. It's just a matter of moving the line to include Jerusalem. At that point, they would be able to levy taxes, and they'd be taxing at the same rate that they tax everybody else they provide fire service for.
And just one more piece on that is that up until a few years ago, from I think the 1960s until a few years ago when it went to that other number, it was something like $460 a year is what they would pay Union Fire District. Now, granted, we always talk about mutual aid and things like that, but at the same time, I do see Rob's point with the fact that the rest of the taxpayers that are paying our Union Fire tax, we're subsidizing a large section of Jerusalem, which isn't paying anything for fire service, but getting the fire service.
Have you asked Narragansett for any reimbursement?
Well,
I have spoken to the town manager in Narragansett, and this is really, from my perspective, this is principally a Union Fire District issue. You're here. It's a very peculiar problem. It's a problem that actually does have a significant impact on taxpayers in South Kingstown. I just wanted to alert you to it.
Can I ask if you have the numbers of what the tax base would, from the tax base, what the bill would be from you to Union or from Union to them?
I've only got a speculative number, but it's high. The value of property in that neighborhood is...
Oh, I'm sure it's high. Okay.
We could get it, right?
We negotiate, I don't know how often these rates are changed, but we share sewer, we share, there are one or two or three
Senior services.
things that we, share. So when we open up those negotiations,
We run the sewer thing.
so, I don't know if that's something that we can look to put on a long-term school funding formula style over the next 10 years, equalize.
We can't have the school funding formula on the same schedule as this one. This one it's a significant amount, but it's not. This is not
No, I mean,
community
so
threatening.
over 10 years, maybe we could phase it in so that they're actually paying their fair share.
Narragansett won't pay it.
To be clear, this
Oh,
is
they
a
give
Union
us some money.
Fire District issue.
do?
That they can do within their jurisdiction, or...
That's
if they
correct.
need a charter change, whatever I'm sure that I can speak for the delegation. If there's something we need to do legislatively, we'd be happy to do that. I'm in full support of Union Fire District. They do a fantastic job.
Yep.
The volunteers, in West Kingston, I think that's probably the most volunteers out of Union Fire District. Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, but they do just a fantastic job. And I know Kingston is different, and that's like the city of URI, as we know. But what a fantastic fantastic job they do. We are so fortunate
Yeah.
to have that dedication.
And Sue, I know Kingston is different, and there's always that kind of Union Fire District versus Kingston. But what we're trying to do nowadays is making sure that we're all included, because they still cover large portions of Kingston. We work together, or they work together, because I haven't been that involved lately. So,
And I do agree. I know they work well with each other. I see the Kingston fire truck come up where I am in the north corner of town, where
No fire hydrants.
Uskapog, we see them come up there. So we're very appreciative of that.
All right. Next is the municipal bond authorization.
This is non-controversial at the state legislature. There are a couple of municipal bonds that the town of South Kingstown is contemplating over the next couple of years. Obviously, these are decisions the council has to make. Again, we put them on the agenda so that you're aware of them and just aren't surprised when they come. We are contemplating a municipal bond, perhaps to support transportation infrastructure, transportation safety improvements, and we're also contemplating a bond in support of school facility improvement. We'll be talking to the council over the next few months, and if those come your way near the end of the session, don't be surprised.
And then those are pretty straightforward. Matunic Seawall Protection Project grant application. So we applied, if you're not familiar with it, for a grant that's being offered just to 3 communities, right? Charlestown, us, and
4 communities, but yeah.
through the resilience program done by the Infrastructure Bank. Rob's opinion is that we're not likely to get the grant that we applied for, but
I can update you on that. We didn't get the grant.
Oh. That was to extend the wall down there?
yeah. So we're going to continue to try and seek out funding, I think.
The bond authorization statute that we were talking about, if we can get any funding, then the need for bonds may go away. If we can get any funding, the need for a large bond may go away. This is a $3 million project. It is an absolutely essential project. Any storm this winter that comes down that section of the road could take that portion, the bend in the road on Matunic Beach Road, away, leaving 280 families cut off from everything. This is a critically needed infrastructure improvement. It's a very expensive project. It is shovel-ready. It's got the permits that it needs from Coastal Resources. We're ready to go, and really the only thing holding us up is the want of $3 million. We just don't have them, and we've got to figure out how to get them.
Rob, was the timing of the grants, was that, I'm just wondering, because I was following very closely when the permits were coming out from the CMC. Was the timing of the grant round have anything to do with the permitting process as well?
It didn't. It was coincidental.
And is there another round of grants?
The governor has proposed another $10 million for this grant program. The grant program that the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank has set up is really not designed for large projects like this. It was designed for smaller projects, which is why we were doubtful that we'd be able to sort of shoehorn this in to the program. We'll be looking. We've been looking for grant money for this project for years now. It's a big nut to crack, and we just haven't been successful. I'm afraid that if we cannot find funding from some source, we are going to have to bond it. And, when we're bonding for schools, when we're looking at 4%, because that's what the state says we should be doing every year, is increasing our tax rate by 4%. Otherwise, we're not going to get any help for education. When we see all of these pressures, these projects, they get pushed aside. And this one, if it gets pushed aside and we have a storm take out that bend in the road, cripples an entire portion of the community.
We're talking about EMS, water, electrical,
Absolutely.
Electrical, water.
just being able to get there.
And then in an emergency situation, we're reactive, right? Instead of being proactive, we're reactive.
Right.
So we really need to be proactive.
Well,
Rob, has
that's
anyone-
exactly right. I mean, if we wait and we have to do the repairs, the cost is going to be, an order of magnitude more than the $3 million.
Any word from the federal delegation? Are there any opportunities there? Have you reached out to
We've
them?
been working with them continuously, and there's just no money right now. I mean, it's just really tight.
It was so controversial, and it took years, the whole permittal process and so forth and so on. But now that huge hurdle has been passed, I think now the federal delegation may look at it differently, and some other agencies may look at it differently now as far as granting some money, now that it's actually happened. Because this has been, as we all know, very controversial for decades. But now we've, so.
The permissions are in place, and really at the permit hearing, the opposition was not, there was not a whole lot of opposition or concern expressed. Folks recognize,
That's a huge
right.
because things have changed. How people are aware of
Yeah.
climate change, and ocean rise, and so forth, and it's a reality.
So we just got to keep our ears open for opportunities, I think.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, the federal delegation has to be probably a piece of this solution. We could cobble together some state grant money, throw some skin in the game from our end, and then hopefully get a match from the Fed somehow. We just got to try and make it happen. So that gets us to the end of our list. Were there things that you came here wanting to speak to us about?
Oh, wait, I got something else. Just... Well, the only other thing I guess we could, just fill you in on is that we are working with the hospital in terms of trying to figure out the best way. Now, granted, they want to do the land swap. Part of me feels that maybe there's some other options we should look at. But the biggest problem that we have is that the town farm property was purchased years ago with federal funding through the parks. So there's restrictions that are tied to that. But at the same time, over time, the town has inadvertently sold pieces of that property to the hospital. So that's the other dilemma that we have. But we are working with DEM, and then the next step is going with the federal delegation to help us.
I think I've been saying this story long enough now that I can explain it concisely. In 1976, the town of South Kingstown took through DEM a grant for $7,000, it may be slightly more than that, but $7,600 for the construction of an outbuilding, a toilet in what was then a 3-ball field town recreation facility. With that grant, the town signed a restrictive covenant saying that we would never use the property for anything other than a park. That grant was made to DEM by the National Park Service. We were a sub-grantee, a sub-recipient of those funds. We committed the state, and the state committed on that grant. There is a process for undoing those restrictive covenants. The way you do it is you get the National Park Service to say, it's okay, you can waive we'll lift the restriction here, but we want to put it on another piece of land. In the past, the town's inadvertent attempt at purchase was actually an attempt to go through that process, and a mistake was made. Rather than making a land swap, deed for deed, we actually paid in 1983. The hospital received payment and purchase. We received payment from the hospital for a portion of that ballpark and used those proceeds to purchase Tuckertown Park. So it was a failed conversion because they didn't follow the letter of the federal regulation. We are now trying to clean up the failed conversion from 1983 and to convert the use of some portion, much of the remaining land at Town Farm. DEM is the lead agency. They are the applicant to the National Park Service. We will be submitting an application to DEM for their review and submission on our behalf to the National Park Service in January, probably around January the second week. Complicated.
It is literally a hop, skip, and a jump from where I live. I've been hearing an awful lot of about this from my neighbors. As you can imagine, particularly the 6 houses that live on the road that currently has a lovely view of the salt pond, as well as those who use it as a recreation area. What is the status of the town using the land that we do in fact own, I believe, where we have some public works? What's the status of that property?
So the Public Works building, the old police station, is a office building, and it's an ambulance station. It's actually being outfitted right now for overnight quarters for a overnight ambulance crew of 4. So it's where paramedics sleep and from which they respond to calls. It's the offices for the Department of Public Services, which is our Public Works department.
And a lot of that land has already been, did we ever sell? Was any of that land ever sold to the hospital? I can't remember.
No, not that land.
But it all abuts.
The old police station is a separate parcel. It is not part of this federal restrictive covenant. It's not covered by any of that. The issue really, I understand the question because folks ask all the time, why not just give that to the hospital and hold on to the park? The answer is the hospital would not be able to make use of that parcel the way they think they could do it. They want to be able to gain access off of Route 1. That is not going to happen for patient access to the hospital. That's not going to happen for
right,
staff
federal highway
access.
Restriction.
Exactly. So they'd end up having to expand their parking lot into sort of a hammerhead, and what's more, they'd have to figure out how to move the paramedics station and the Department of Public Services. The expense for finding an alternative location for those 2 facilities is large. It's multi-millions of dollars, and the hospital has expressed an inability to spend those sorts of sums.
Yeah. Some of the concerns I've heard, though, is that people don't want that view to go away, which I kind of agree with. I had asked the hospital CEO whether or not they could build a garage, but they're saying it's cost prohibitive.
Definitely. I was just wondering, I wanted to hear it right from the town's mouth, what the limitations were on the former police station building. I would encourage you all to take a walk down there and see it from the perspective of those homeowners. And, I don't know what type of arrangement, and I'm a firm supporter. I want the hospital to be able to expand. It is, clearly the number one employer in my district. They have been wonderful neighbors. Full disclosure, my husband is the medical director of the wound care center there, and it is wonderful to have a community hospital in our neighborhood. But I'm hopeful that we can find an alternative to the current proposal.
So I can
If I
report.
can just say one more thing. And I think there might be a number of improvements that could improve recreational access to the area by the marinas. If you have a moment to take a walk one day, walk under that underpass, try to traverse the on-ramps that go to Route 1 South, try to, in the summertime, walk past on that sidewalk while there is shrubbery growing from sidewalk cracks. I think that there can be improvements made along there so that the people in the vicinity can have improved access to that beautiful recreation area that's down there.
So I can report that there's been some progress in trying to figure out an alternative. When the Recreation Commission held a public hearing on this 2 weeks ago maybe, a recommendation came from the public, and the recommendation that the Recreation Commission made to the council included a desire to maintain a park of some size at that location. I've met with the president of the hospital, and they presented last night a plan for a ring, a horseshoe, that would provide some public access to the water views and would provide some recreation facility, not not a 3-acre facility, but a fairly, significant band of green, a walking trail kind of park around the perimeter of the former ball fields. So there's some progress being made toward figuring out how to have our cake and eat it too. We'll see where it ultimately ends up.
If I could get a copy of that proposal, I would appreciate it.
I wasn't there last night. I was here, but they were going to present it last night to the Rec Commission.
Oh, the Rec Commission meeting, okay.
Rob, they have valet parking over there now, I believe, right?
They do.
And where are they bringing the cars when they valet? Because most of the people who do that is because there's no parking spaces. Oh, they're still on site? Oh, they are?
Can I also add that this came in front of the town council years ago, I think before you were on, Carol. And Lou Giancola, great man, I love what he did for the hospital, came and asked to buy the lot or buy the field for $1. And the council said absolutely not. So my feeling is still the same, that that's a beautiful park. There's not a lot of Little League fields that are on the ocean like that, or a park that could be used even for soccer purposes. So I'm going to still stand firm in what I said and what we did many years ago, and not to sell that property.
So we're not selling. The proposal by the hospital is to swap 35 acres of land up in the Oskapog area, the property north of Peter Potts Pottery, in exchange for the 3 acres plus the land that they've already acquired through that prior deal. It's not a sale of the land, it's a swap. And the only way that swap will be approved is if the National Park Service determines that the recreational and monetary value of the land that we would receive is greater than the value of the land that we're giving up.
Is it public information on what the appraisal came back on the town farm property? I can't recall.
Yeah, the town farm appraisal was $160,000.
Which is based off of the fact the zoning is really the issue there.
It's
determining value.
Government and institutionally zoned. That's correct.
A public hearing will be held on January 13th at our town council meeting, and at that point we'll be voting on the submittal of the application. Is that correct?
That is correct. The next step in the process is simply submitting the application. It's not, to decide whether to accept the land, or it's to submit an application to have the federal government tell us whether the recreational and monetary value is sufficient and a conversion would be allowed. If the feds say a conversion would be allowed, there's a next step in the process. If they say no, then, we're not going to be able to convert that property, and that's that.
The hospital needs the parking. I mean, I've talked to them myself, and they have nowhere else to go, really, do they?
Can I ask you a quick question? I was just thinking about this. Their busy time, from what I remember, is somewhere between 9 and 2 o'clock, right? During the week, Monday to Friday. Marina Park, could there be some kind of a shuttle service?
I was just thinking the same thing, because that parking lot across from Java Madness.
What are you going to do in the summer?
In the summer, Marina Park
I know.
is absolutely packed.
But, I mean, we have to facilitate some kind of parking for the hospital. I mean,
It would be for employees.
So again, Marina Park during the off-season is available to anybody who wants to park there. During the summer, Marina Park is just filled. I mean, there's no place to park down there.
If I could ask a little bit about the property up in Oskapog, is that something that the town would be purchasing, or is that something that would be...
Swap?
No, it's the hospital would purchase it and exchange it, because remember, the frustration with the 1983 attempted conversion was that the hospital paid the town cash. And the National Park Service said, no, you broke the rules. You weren't supposed to take cash. You were supposed to take a deed. So the hospital has entered into a purchase and sales agreement with the owners of that property. If the National Park Service says this is a good conversion, they will buy it and give that deed to us when we give the deed to Town Farm to them.
And the only other thing I would add to that is that this is a very important thing for the state and for our community. The state has their eyes on this because it wasn't done properly in the past, and they don't want to jeopardize any further funding in the future by not making sure that this is done properly.
We're not alone, by the way. There are hundreds of these, I suspect, in Rhode Island. There are probably thousands of these improper conversions that have happened over the years across the country. This happens all the time because it's a very complicated set of restrictions, and over time they become unreasonable and people don't live up to them.
Well, it certainly is quite a parcel up there in Glen Rock. And if you've been reading the papers recently about the sightings of mountain lions and bobcats, it's quite a spot for wildlife.
It's a gorgeous spot. It really is absolutely gorgeous.
So the intent is passive recreation up there. The intent is not to build a ball field. Right?
That wouldn't work.
There's some
Probably wouldn't work too well up there with those
some misinformation
mountain
out
lions
there
and
that
so
it was
forth.
going to be, apples to apples. That's
I personally wouldn't want to be hiking with mountain lions, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's quite a wild area up there. I mean, there's I know I raise livestock, but it's in every night because it's the world we live in.
We also have land up there already. We bought partially with Richmond in the Crowley Preserve years ago, too. So that abuts that. So that's land that's already...
That's correct. And there's also a small parcel that the town owns on James Trail currently that abuts on two sides the property that the hospitals offered.
Well, we're going to have a whole public hearing about that issue. You're welcome to come down and attend that as well.
January 13th, right?
At what time? 13th?
It's a regular time.
So 7:30.
It's going to be the public hearing for the land swap.
So the hearing itself will probably be around 7:45, something like that.
Thank you for
Just
clarifying.
one more note, because since we've spent so much time on this, there is a public comment period on that proposed swap that is open now until January 13th. So we're accepting comments now from any constituents, anyone who has thoughts or concerns about it.
I just want to give one last opportunity. If anything that all right. I'm going to take that as a no. So item 3 on the agenda is other matters of interest and concern. That is an opportunity for the public to come up and comment on maybe what you've heard tonight or some other issues that you think we all can be collaborating on. And just state your name for the record.
Good evening, Maria Mack. Thank you, members of the council, representatives, and senators for being here. Certainly this UN-style seating lends itself to good conversation, doesn't it? As you all know, I have been involved in land use policy for quite some time, and I'd say for the past 5 or 6 sessions have found myself up at the State House before bills in the position of being more, unfortunately, reactive rather than proactive. The conversation earlier about the coastal communities in particular being of seemingly lesser importance than the urban areas is true as far as land use is concerned. I think we all need to continue to be vigilant so that we don't lose our ability to self-govern, and obviously we have a lot of work to do. So keep up the good work, and thank you.
And Maria, thank you, because as we discussed earlier, we have 48 hours notice for these hearings, and somehow you manage to keep us, when you find out that the hearings are happening, you keep us in the loop, you educate us, you inform us, you really give us the tools to adequately defend the pieces of legislation that sometimes get put before us. So I just want to say thank you to you, because I know I couldn't do what I do without the help of your expertise, so thanks.
Ditto.
I think it's all a ditto.
Jim O'Neill, Matunic. Just a couple of questions. On the municipal court, Does the traffic tribunal cover everything to do with automobiles, including parking? How much do they cover, and how much could a municipal court handle?
They don't do parking tickets.
Pardon?
They do speeding tickets. Actually, you might be able to do some speeding tickets. They do, any kind of suspended license or drunk driving. They do all of that stuff.
It looks like parking and maybe speeding.
Parking would definitely be in it, and they're doing most of the speeding tickets, so I shouldn't say that.
My understanding is that we would do parking tickets locally, and there may be some opportunity for some moving violations.
Yeah.
In North Kingstown, they do speeding tickets.
Okay, so there is some hope there. I thought the traffic tribunal totally took away everything connected with automobiles.
I mean, right now, the speeding tickets for people, if you object, you're going right to Wakefield. So when you get the ticket and it says either pay or show up for court, you're going right into the Wakefield courthouse for your arraignment, and then you go, if you continue to object, you go to Cranston for the traffic tribunal. So that's the way they're handling it now. I suspect they don't want to give that up. Even if they're doing it in East Greenwich or North Kingstown, I believe you've had your municipal court for some time, and some of these places were able to keep that ability, but then once we did the traffic tribunal, if you didn't have a municipal court, you probably may have lost the right to proceed that way. But we'll have to find that out, if they'll give that up. But I know there is a jurisdictional war going on, and they don't want to give up what they have, so.
Right, and for a little light moment tonight, I do have to ask, would our municipal court have handled the infamous seaweed caper in South Kingstown?
I don't know. That was a misdemeanor, wasn't it? That was a misdemeanor, yeah, so that, yeah. Yeah.
So it would have gone where?
It went to district court.
Okay. Anyway, that is...
Actually, charges were never brought against him. The charges were dropped. He was never arraigned.
Yeah.
We did just get out of a...
$25,000.
Oh, boy.
Not a bad deal.
For a little seaweed.
To the schools for a minute. I've been at this podium so many times I can't think straight anymore, but South Kingstown has got to accept a little bit of blame here for having this problem with the education funding formula. I came in the office back in 2000 when we had 4,383 kids in our school system, no preschool. Now if you take the preschool out, we're 1,600 kids less. What have we done? We closed South Road, a 300-kid school system. If anybody at the State House is looking at those numbers, they're going to say $4.7 million is too much money that we're getting. Just using numerical looks. Yes, and even worse than that, we actually opened Broad Rock in 2002 with 600 kids. So we're plus 300 and down 1,600 population. Crazy. I've been to a couple of meetings where Miss Green has spoken, and she's really sharp. And I see us running into a no-choice situation in the decade ahead. I see the state of Rhode Island, if we're expecting more money in the suburban communities, the rural communities, we are going to have to become like the East Greenwich system, Charahoe, Bristol Warren. We're going to be forced to merge. Many people up there are asking why Narragansett and South Kingstown aren't working together, and Charlestown for that matter. You have no answers for it. You've seen Green now telling, she hasn't ordered yet, but she's saying Middletown, Newport, wake up. You've got to be one. So this is somewhere on the horizon. We're going to be looking at this. And it's going to be proven with the 2020 census, because the only place in Rhode Island that's grown by a couple thousand is Providence, mainly from immigration. We're up about... 14,000 from the 2010 census. We're around 1,065,000. With a strong economy nationally, we will lose a House seat. There's no question about it. People are moving everywhere but the slow growth states. Even though we've done a lot of things right in Rhode Island, we haven't kept the populations that other states are gaining. And with that, it's going to be tougher to get money out of Washington. That's obvious. So I'm very, 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 very concerned about that. So hopefully you've got some answers for all these things. But the merger situation has me very concerned. The only thing about the education funding formula, which drives me nuts, why does Westerly, with only a couple hundred kids less than us, getting twice the amount of money we are, when Westerly right now has the highest state in Rhode Island residential properties values? So someone has to explain that to me. And I have 5 other municipalities I can find that. So something's wrong just in that modest little area. But knowing how badly the need is in the urban core for money, they'll just knock them down and won't help us. So these are great concerns. And the University of Rhode Island, yeah, when I was there, 65% of the budget was paid by the state. And now they're at 8%. They are a great friend of this community in Narragansett, like it or not. I remember many studies we did back in the council days. The economic importance of that university is incredible. As a matter of fact, when we asked them, one big year, I think they had about 20 kids that were attending our school system, and we didn't charge them anything. And frankly, they made an incredible case then. That was Bob Crothers who was president, but they made a very strong case as to their value to us, and we couldn't argue against that. But the only thing that I see happening with this university is incredible growth. I see the publicity coming this way. I'm seeing finally some of the alumni really putting the money in places in that university which are going to bring hopefully some commercial enterprises from their research. This school is dynamite. And you add the coastal aspect of this down in the North Kingstown, Narragansett area. But that oceanographic school with this ship coming in a few years is going to be something to behold, so we can be very proud of that school. But the school budget's coming up. This is going to be a battle, and I know from the conversation, if we're looking at 4%, we're going to have to be prepared for referendums. No other way to look at it. Thank you.
All right, I think that may have exhausted the public. So, unless there are any final comments up here.
I just want to thank the delegation for taking time out of your busy holiday schedule a week before Christmas. I think it's my 6th year on the council. I don't think this has ever happened, and I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
I'd like to make a motion.
We don't even need a motion.
Okay, we're
We're just
good.
going to end this meeting right now.
Turn the camera off.
Well, that doesn't make anybody feel too good, right, after a meeting like that?
No. No, but it's,
Well, Jim is
wasn't
right.
supposed to feel
First
good.
it's the Urbans, then it's the